Hello everybody, welcome to another video. Today is the 23rd of September. Today we're doing a full frontline update beginning by looking at the Kherson front. In this region, I will say that more generally there has been a decrease in DRG activity and a decrease in cross-river shelling. The only area where you could say it's the most active at now is between Olhivka and Mykolaievka. And this is coming based off of reports from Rybar, and I have to mention them because they're the only source that's going in depth about the situation over here. So obviously take it with a grain of salt. But what they said is that the Russians are striking Ukrainian formations on Kozachi Island, which tells us two things. First of all, that the 131st Reconnaissance Brigade is operating in this area around the city of Novokakhovka. And it also tells us that the Ukrainians do have at least a certain presence within this island, which was previously thought to be a gray zone. And the most important thing to take away from what Rybar said from this Kherson reports is the fact that they're mentioning the movement of reinforcements from the Ukrainian side to the front line around the Dnieper River. They mentioned that elements of the 129th Territorial Defense Brigade will be sending in additional men and mortars to the Olhivka-Mykolaievka line that we were just talking about. And this is very interesting because about a month ago, we saw a lot of videos from the 129th Territorial Defense Brigade of their activities on the Velika Novosilka axis, which means that either they split up their forces between two different fronts or that they moved the entire formation from the Donetsk and the southern counteroffensive to this area around Kherson. Now, additionally, Rybar claims that the Ukrainians are moving in 5,100 men, which is actually larger than a brigade-sized formation by a little, and that they're moving in 197 units of equipment, which include Humvees, Cossacks, and Kirpi armored vehicles, BTR-70s, BTR-80s, Oshkosh M ATVs, and MRAP Mastiffs. So all of these lighter vehicles that we saw on the Zaporozhye front and around Donetsk, those being moved to the front around Kherson from the city of Dnipro. That's what Rybar is claiming. I can't confirm that independently, but that is very interesting. On the Verbove front, I can't really talk about additional videos, especially around Robotyne. We're not seeing a lot of new videos popping up, but we do have reports coming in that the Ukrainians have been able to advance what appears to be like a couple hundred meters to the south of the trench fortification that is to the north of Novoprokopivka. But nonetheless, we're not actually seeing any Ukrainian attacks within the village of Novoprokopivka yet. If we go a bit to the east, there haven't really been any reports mentioning changes to the front line around Verbove since that video that came out of the Ukrainian vehicles from the 82nd Brigade, including Strikers and Martyrs, that were able to cross past the anti-tank ditch and the Dragon's Teeth, and in some cases actually past the manned trench. But speaking of the manned trench, there's one video that was released 2 days ago that I want to show because it does give us a good idea of actually the landscape in this area, and it shows that Ukrainian troops in the manned trench were under Russian artillery fire, which shows that the Russians are still shelling the Ukrainian forces as they advance. And it shows that the Ukrainians are now increasing the amount of men that they have within their squads when they attempt to infiltrate from one trench to the other. And you can see that the geolocation marker shows that the Ukrainians were able to advance past the first section of the manned trench where they had the strongest amount of activity for the past 2-3 weeks, and they had to cross past this tree line to reach this section of the trench, which is only a couple hundred meters away from Verbove itself. I'm not actually going to show the video because it is pretty graphic, but I will just describe what's going on over here. Here is the section of the trench that I was talking about that has the most Ukrainian activity. It's a junction between the horizontal and the vertical parts of the manned trench. Here you can see the tree line that Ukrainian forces have to cross over in order to reach the next section of the manned trench. And that's where you saw a lot of Russian shelling. A lot of Russian forces were shelling that specific tree line because once the Ukrainians got out of their trench, they were pretty exposed. There was not a lot of foliage within that specific tree line. It's pretty easy to catch sight of any infantry that are operating around there. And even once the Ukrainian forces entered the trench, there's not a lot of cover there either. There are certain dugouts or something with a covering on top that you could hide in. But for the most part, it is completely open over there within those trenches. So if you have a precision artillery strike on a certain area, then it could lead to pretty high casualties if the Ukrainian squads are not actively moving around and trying to evade the artillery fire. But either way, this gives us an idea of the fact that Ukraine is now increasing the amount of men in their squads, because within this video, I saw like 2 or 3 different squads that had like 4 men each. So now it's not just one squad operating alone, it's multiple squads that are working together in larger numbers, that are trying every single day, multiple times a day, to get closer and closer to Verbove. But of course, it comes at a cost. And of course, the rate of these advances is very, very slow at the moment. On the Velika Novosilka front, we have not seen much activity over the past month, ever since the Ukrainians captured Robotyne. This can mean one of two things: either that the Ukrainians are still letting their units in this region replenish as they prepare for additional attacks further south on villages in the direction of Stormlinivka, or it can mean that Ukraine has completely abandoned their offensive activities over here because they want to focus their efforts more so on other parts of the front line where they do still have increased activity, like around Robotyne, or maybe even like Rybar was claiming around Kherson. But if we look at what's going on around Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk, I had to change the map to indicate that the Russians now have control of the positions that are to the south of the Shaitanka River. This is because the Ukrainians were not able to hold on to their fort positions that they were able to take over in the initial days of their attacks in this region. And it seems like over the past 2 to 4 days, really, we haven't seen any additional reports of Ukrainian attacks on these specific towns. We'll have to see if they end up attacking this direction again in the future with a larger formation, perhaps maybe one from the Velika Novosilka axis, because we know that in the original attacks on Novodonetsk and Novomayorsk, the 35th Marine Brigade was utilized, which was fighting around Robotyne previously. So maybe some other Marine brigades could be used in further attacks on this sector. Now, around Klishchiivka, there is a very similar story. Since the Ukrainians captured the village of Klishchiivka and also Andriivka, we have not seen them launching that many additional attacks further to the east or further to the north. And this is understandable because the Ukrainians, they fought in a very heavy battle that lasted months in this region. And a lot of these units were not able to be rotated out for a very long time, including Liuts, including 5th Assault Brigade, 3rd Assault Brigade. These are very, very battle-hardened units that certainly were forced to fight at the vanguard. They were the vanguard of the Ukrainian formations in here for so long that they probably do need to have some sort of replenishment before launching any sort of major attacks going further east or further north, or even further south towards Kordymivka, for instance. So now we're seeing a bit of a pause, but even within this pause, we do still have additional videos which do indicate Ukrainian advances. There's one here of Russian artillery that hit Ukrainian troops near a rail line. Let me zoom in first and show you guys that this strike occurred on like a rural dacha area. There's a few houses over here and also what looks like a train station. So this would indicate that the Ukrainian forces, or at least their forward formations, are able to reach the rail line in another area. The rail line is over here. It seems like the Ukrainians are trying their best even now to clear out every single Russian element that is to the west of the rail line. So here is the house that the Ukrainian forces entered. You can see it's not a large group that entered. It looks like there was only 2 troops actually. So this shows that this is a certain part of the Klishchiivka front that is at lower intensity fighting. Here you could actually see the rail line as well, and you could see that there's no like presence of Russian forces that we could see ourselves, and that they're actually shelling the Ukrainian forces, which means that it could be even further to the east. And you could also see that the rail line over here isn't really on much of a higher elevated mound or anything. So that puts into question the extent of the Russian defenses within this specific portion of the rail line. But I'll just show the artillery strike and we'll move on. So here you could see the shelling, and you could see that if you zoom out a little bit, here you could see another house that potentially the Ukrainian forces try to enter. And yeah, that's just a situation around Klishchiivka for now. Now, we haven't talked much about the Sevastopol front in a while, and that's because the fighting over here is positional in nature. But if we zoom in, there has been a recorded change to the front line, specifically around what I refer to as the Jerebetz River bridgehead, which I think spans this area over here more generally. And the Russians within this attack on the bridgehead that they tried to expand, originally they were able to take control of the village of Nadia, but it seems like over the past 4 days, There's been video footage of Russian forces shelling Ukrainians within this village, which would indicate that the Ukrainians have been able to take it back some point in the past. And the unit that released this video of the shelling is actually the Black Hussars drone unit. There's a few videos from this unit of the 15th Motor Rifle Brigade, which is another formation that the Russians have operating in this region. And it shows them targeting Ukrainian forces. Let me show that video to you guys. So here, let's open it up, and you could see the tank that was utilized for the shelling. And then it fires the round, and here you could see the village of Nadia itself. I actually never saw any footage from Nadia up until now, so this is very interesting. You can see that there's not many houses in the region. I can't even see any. It's mainly just a forest. And you'd expect that after such heavy fighting in the region, that there would be a decrease in the foliage and that a lot of these trees would be raised. But it seems like a lot of the environment over here has been able to stay intact, and that could be used to the Ukrainians' advantage as they try to use these heavily, very dense trees to their advantage. But nonetheless, you could see there is at least a certain level of Russian shelling in this region. And lastly, we must discuss the strikes by the Ukrainians on the Russian Black Sea Fleet headquarters that occurred yesterday. So that occurred in the city of Sevastopol in Crimea. It was hit by 2 French-supplied Scalp EG missiles, and that's a variant of the British Storm Shadow long-range air-launched cruise missiles that have a range that exceeds 250 kilometers. I saw that it could be much more than that, spanning from 250 to 550 kilometers. But either way, the target here in question of Sevastopol is about 250, 260 kilometers away from the front line. But I would imagine that the aircraft that launched the missile would be stationed a bit further to the north because you wouldn't want to be at the line of contact specifically. So here is some footage, and it appears that missiles were able to penetrate several floors of the building and caused some significant structural damage. So I'll just show some of the videos that were recorded on the ground. And there's one in particular showing one of the missiles actually entering the building. So here you can see that strike, and I'll do it very slowly. I'll toggle it here. You could see, did you see that? You could see the penetration. But something that this woman and many others from the Ukrainian side, well, actually official Ukrainian sources as well, such as Budanov, are also claiming this. What they're saying is that Admiral Sokolov, who is the commander of the Black Sea Fleet, was killed in the strike. There is no evidence of this yet, so don't jump to conclusions. Wait for additional confirmation to come from some sort of external source. That's what the Ukrainian side is saying. And Budanov is also saying that the deputy commander of the Southern Military District, Alexander Romanchuk, was severely wounded in the strike. And I believe he's actually the commander that's leading the Russian defense in the Zaporozhye front at the moment. So what I've heard from a lot of the Ukrainian side is that this strike was specifically, they decided on doing it right now specifically because there was some sort of meeting going on between some of Russia's top military brass. Again, that's also unconfirmed, and you have to wait for like additional images and additional reports to come out about any sort of Russian casualties. But what the Ukrainians are saying is that there were 9 Russians killed and 16 wounded. What I think is that if there were to be a meeting of such high-level officials, I would expect that it wouldn't be done within a building like this that is out in the open, that has previously been targeted by the Ukrainians, and within a city that is constantly being targeted by the Ukrainians. It would just be very, very short-sighted. I would assume that it would be done in some bunker underground somewhere far away from the actual front line, but I'm not sure. And another thing I find interesting is that going back about a year ago, you had a similar Ukrainian strike, obviously not with cruise missiles, but with kamikaze drones, I believe, on the Black Sea Fleet headquarters, and it basically caused 0 damage. I think that it might have had some damage to the roof, but that was it, and it was very quickly cleaned up. And now you see the difference a year later with the supply of Western weaponry and how now the building is actually experiencing significant damage. Now the question is, how does this affect the front line and the war in general? Well, we have to wait and see, because if generals were actually killed, then that would have an effect. If they weren't, then it's more so a symbolic victory. If it did disrupt the activities of the Black Sea Fleet, then that would actually have an impact on the war, because remember, the Black Sea Fleet is not just operating in a naval capacity. The Black Sea Fleet also coordinates all the logistics of the Russian forces going in from Krasnodar into Crimea and into the Kherson front. A lot of the Black Sea Fleet's units are actually fighting on the front line, whether it be in Kherson or in Zaporozhye. So destroying the main coordination points between those units can have some significance. Also, the Black Sea Fleet is responsible for launching a lot of the Geron 2 drones that end up hitting the Ukrainian forces. So that's another point about their significance in the war. But that's all for today. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.